everything that you can imagine is getting, well, expensive. Just look at the prices of homes, to the prices of cars, to the rising prices at Disney World, to the increasing grocery costs, to the prices of gas, and of course, avocado prices. At this rate, it'll be cheaper for you to dry your tears with dollar bills than with tissue paper. Why, Chipotle? Why do you keep doing this to me? Inflation is really getting out of hand, and it doesn't look like there's a very clear solution to how the Fed and the government are going to solve this inflation problem. Like in 2021, we saw 7% inflation, while at the same time, wages in 2021 grew by 4%. Now here we are today after this quote breakneck wage growth, and we're starting to see wage growth already start to slow down, and it's projected that wages are only going to go up by 3.4% in 2022, while inflation doesn't look like it's slowing down anytime soon. Effectively, what that means is you can work your butt off all year and you work so hard that you get an above average raise, but after your raise, you're going to be poorer than you were before. It's happening because inflation has been getting out of hand and it's been running a lot harder than expected while the economy can't keep up, and the person who is paying the price is, well, the average person, who now has to pay more money for their groceries, you have to pay more money for your gas, you have to pay more money for your healthcare, and you have to pay more money to go on a vacation. Every time I go out and get some groceries, I feel like I'm paying more money now than I was just a couple weeks before, and the reason why we're seeing such high inflation is because, well, in 2020 and 2021, we printed $13 trillion in pandemic relief, quantitative easing, and infrastructure money. And now, well, we're paying the price for all this money printing. This money printing helped at the time. The pandemic hit, the economy shut down, nobody was working, businesses were shut down, and so the government worked with the Federal Reserve Bank to print an insane amount of money, and they sent it out to businesses, they sent it out to people, they created welfare programs, they created social programs, they created a whole bunch of things to help stimulate the economy and to get the economy moving. And so while people weren't producing anything, the government and the Fed kept producing money. And so what that did was it essentially diluted the value of our dollars. To put it in perspective, the most expensive war that we have ever fought was World War II. And the cost of World War II adjusted for inflation was $5 trillion. So over the course of the pandemic and the pandemic relief programs, we printed almost 3 times more, the entire cost of World War II adjusted for inflation, just to fight the pandemic. Now, whether or not we needed this $13 and if it went to the right hands is something that I will let you decide, but the issue right now is this created inflation. Inflation is when you inflate the monetary supply, which is what we saw happen here. The government didn't have $13 trillion, so what they did is they worked with the Federal Reserve Bank to inflate the monetary supply. The Fed printed this money, gave it to the government, and the government spent this money. So now, when you inflate the monetary supply, you create inflation, which ultimately dilutes the value of the dollar, makes the value of the dollar go down, which then makes things more expensive. If you've been subscribed to my channel, this isn't news. But now the question is, we have this problem, what's the solution? And it seems pretty obvious. The solution then is to fight inflation, but the solution isn't so simple. If the problem is we have too much money in our economic system, then the solution is we need less money. So raise interest rates and essentially burn money, Pablo Escobar style. That could work, except we're not in a normal economy right now. See, you have a lot of people that are not financially educated that are blaming this inflation problem on supply chain issues. But what you're missing is that the supply chain issues that we're seeing are a side effect of the inflation that we have. Because if we go back to the pandemic, people are not working, people don't have an income. If they weren't given this money, what would you see happen? Well, people will be buying less stuff because they just don't have as much money. But if the government and the Fed can produce money essentially out of thin air, give it to people, now you have money that you can spend even though you're not producing anything. And so now if you're spending money on things that you're not producing and you just start buying a whole bunch of things, well, what does that do? You create a whole bunch of demand to buy products with no supply of these products. That's what triggered the supply chain mess. And then you have to ask yourself, once the supply chain gets completely ironed out, are companies just gonna magically lower the price of their products when people are willing to pay more money to buy a product? I don't know for sure, but chances are probably not. Here's how our economy works when we're in a normal economic environment. When we start to enter a downward economy, this might be a bust, a recession, that's when the Fed will come out and they will also cut interest rates. The reason that they want to cut interest rates is because this helps to stimulate the economy. When you're lowering interest rates, more people are likely to borrow money. When more people are borrowing money, more dollars are entering our economic circulation, which helps to increase inflation. And that's what the government and the Fed are banking on to help stimulate the economy. Now, when you are in a booming economy, things are growing very well, that's when you see the opposite happen. That's when you see the Fed raise interest rates because they don't want to see the economy get out of hand because that could create a bubble that's very, very, very large. And so what they do to help cool down the economy and to keep the economy stable is they raise interest rates. This makes borrowing money more expensive. And this really helps stabilize things because if people have to pay more money to get a loan, well then they're probably a little more financially stable because they have the means to support the interest payments. So now it's more expensive for you to buy a home, it's more expensive to have credit card debt, and it's more expensive for businesses to borrow money and invest it back into their company. But if the economy keeps growing, that shows you that you're in a robust society because now you are able to pay back your interest and still be profitable. This will also in turn lower inflation because as you're raising interest rates, less dollars are being borrowed. As less dollars are being borrowed, well, that shrinks the monetary supply, which lowers inflation. Well, the problem that we're facing right now is that our economy is slowing down and we could be entering a secondary recession. When the first jobs report of 2022 came out, everybody thought that we would add at least a couple 100,000 jobs, but what ended up happening was that we lost 300,000 jobs in the early part of 2022, and on top of that, the economy overall is starting to slow. The reason why we're seeing the economy slow down is because of right here, inflation. Our economy runs on spending. When you have money and you spend it, somebody else makes money. The more money you spend, the more money somebody else makes. In order for our economy to function, people have to be spending money. If you are not going to the restaurant and buying the extra guac, well then the restaurant's not going to have any money to pay their employees, let alone have any money to open up a second store. In 2021, people were rich. They had a lot of money in their pocket because then we were finally coming out of the pandemic, and so people had some savings because they weren't spending money in 2020 and the early part of 2021. So they had cash in the bank. You didn't have to worry about paying your mortgage until the forbearance program ended, and you didn't have to make a lot of expenses, and so people had money in the bank, and a lot of people were able to pull out a lot of cash out of their homes. So people were rich on paper because everybody had a lot of money, and then you started to see this boom in 2021 because everybody was spending money. You had all this pent-up demand from the pandemic, and now people were spending money like crazy, even though the price of things were going up. They didn't really care because they had the money to spend, and people wanted to spend money. This is what we saw happen. Well, now in 2022, people have exhausted a lot of the money that they saved up in 2021 and 2020, and now the prices of things are so high because of the inflation that we saw happen, the money printing that we saw happen, and now people are not spending as much because, well, they just can't buy as much. And because people aren't spending as much, the economy isn't growing as fast. And so businesses aren't able to make as much money, which means they aren't able to hire as many employees, which means the whole system isn't moving as fast as economists would like. If you enjoyed this short clip from my longer videos, here's another clip that I think you'll love. And while you're at it, if you're interested in learning more about how to start generating passive income, our team put together an amazing guide that goes over what passive income is, how to start generating passive income, and different passive income strategies. All you gotta do is click that button right over there. Thank you for watching, and as always, keep hustling.